Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Sex Ed for You podcast, where research meets reality.
This is the podcast for people who want to date and have great sex that is safe, fun, and enjoyable.
We desire to empower our listeners to make informed decisions that lead to values-based living. I am Lauren. I am a Certified Holistic Sexuality Educator and the very proud owner of Sex Ed for You.
She is, and I am Holland, and I am our Chief Culture and Content Coordinator here at Sex Ed for You. And today we are joined by Lauren, as we are every single episode. But the lovely thing about today is this is a renewed Lauren, a Lauren with extra expertise on the wheel of consent, because she just went to an incredible training, and we are excited to hear all about it.
Yeah, I was just immersed for 5 entire days on my favorite modality in the world, and that is Dr. Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent. If you're watching, hi. I'm so thankful for you. It was just so juicy. So juicy. Like, I kept thinking this the whole time, Steffi must pay for Holland to come and do this exact training, because it first and foremost solidified what we do and how we do it the entire week. I kept wondering if I was going to say, I would have 3 pages when I was note-taking, and I'm remarkable. First page would just be, favorite things they're saying. Second thing was questions to consider with Holland later. And then the third page was diagrams or other random brain moments. And in the beginning, I thought, am I going to want to redo the ways we do things? Am I going to want to redo the way we do needs assessments, redo the way we work with clients, yada, yada? And no, I am really proud of this business. Really proud of how we've built it from the ground up, the way we center our clients at all times, the way we do not work in a hierarchical model of hey, you're guru, Lauren, and you, the student. I am so incredibly pleased with the way that we equip our clients and our listeners and viewers to make their own informed decisions, right? That we are constantly transferring power back, that we are constantly saying, you are inherently whole. The world just threw on a bunch of baggage. That has been our heart, our drive since the very beginning, not to create codependencies upon the business. Just made me a very proud mama. I was like, oh, I like that we're doing that. And I got to deconstruct the wheel of consent that I've been teaching for about 2 years in a way that blew my mind.
Right.
You know when they do a deconstructed dessert?
Yes.
That's what this was. This was like a trifle. It was taking all the pieces you would usually take to make a cake, and instead looking at each ingredient slowly but surely, and why is this important? And okay, so I'll kind of start high level, and then we'll really dig into the wheel. What was so cool is that this whole workshop was called Like a Pro, Wheel of Consent. The Wheel of Consent was not drawn until the afternoon of day 3.
Wow.
When I say deconstructed.
Really deconstructed.
Totally deconstructed. So that I'll be doing differently, because by the time our instructors, shout out to Carmen and Robin, you're amazing. By the time they drew it, we had lived in. We had experienced each quadrant so deeply that you didn't have to teach about it.
Right.
You referenced back to body-based memories we all had now.
That's cool.
So the teaching nerd in me was
what a great way to lay out the land.
Because I've been trying to explain it to folks for 2 years. And when I first showed them the wheel, which you can put on,
they're overwhelmed,
right? Y'all, look at this. It is simple, but not.
Yes.
Right? You can see, all right, I see consent. All right, I can identify, serve, take, allow, accept. Okay.
But you need to be walked through it by somebody who definitely knows what it is.
So, yeah, it's just so beautiful talking about consent as agreements on what is done and who it is done to and who it is for. Yes, 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 and yes. as a field, we have been trying to help folks understand consent for the longest time, right? We've talked about fries on here before. We've talked about RACs. We've talked about all these different ways to talk about consent. But just saying enthusiastic consent is not enough, right? There is so much that goes on in this experience. And just talking about no is not enough, because oftentimes there are people who don't know they can say no.
Yes.
Or because they have no choice, have to say yes. So, yeah, it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. So, Jiminy, what sounds best if you were a listener, viewer? What would you like to know? Would you like to know, like, what we did, or would you like me to try to explain what the Wheel of Consent is?
I want to hear about, like those first 2.5 days before it was drawn. And then I think let's jump into the Wheel of Consent. Let's kind of almost model it how you would explain it to a client, but nondescript, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So my clients would know, and anyone who ever considers working with us in the future, the crafting of a container together is paramount important in our work. We will always say that trust is not something I just deserve. Trust is earned through trustworthy behavior. Mm-hmm. And so even as we carefully co-create a space together for learning and growing and expansion, I don't deserve anybody's trust. That comes over time. So the first entire day, we just spent crafting a safer container, creating working agreements, creating different things that would make all of us feel most comfortable. Then we really worked on embodied yeses and nos and maybes.
Okay.
And that was the coolest thing. We just like walked around the space, embodying yes and no, yelling it, whispering it, all these types of things. Then maybe. All of the different ways we could say that in our body. And then no. And for many, not just me, that brought up tears of times where you wanted to say yes or times where you wanted to say no and felt like you couldn't. So that was just really awesome and made me very happy, because I have a couple of clients right now that we're working on embodied yes and embodied no, doing some mirroring exercises.
What's the difference between an embodied yes and just a yes? Like, what is that delineation?
So in sex school, we talk about that there are times where we're saying yes and we really mean yes. And there are times when we're saying yes and we mean maybe. And there are times when we're saying yes when we mean no. Yeah.
I can hear it in your tone,
Right?
baby.
I mean, we could all practice it. You give me one. Give me a yes where Holland really means no.
Yeah.
Give me a yes where Holland means maybe.
Yeah.
Give me a yes where you mean yes.
Yeah.
So literally, I mean, goosebumps all over my body. This is what we walked around the room doing.
That's wild.
And to hear it,
Yeah.
we all know. We all know. We just don't take a minute to call it out on what it is. And it was absolutely paramount that our instructors allow us the opportunity to come to grips with our own ways of not being truthful. Because many of us have done that as a strategy to stay safe. Let's just call it what it is. But in a space where you're going to be learning and growing and opting into touch exercises, not sexual touch, but human touch, we need to know that everybody is very aware of their own limits and their own discomforts. Okay, give me a no when you mean yes.
No, when I mean yes. No. It's always going to be like 50 of them.
Give me a no where you mean maybe.
No.
And give me a no where you mean no.
No. It's always like the shortened, like I can, the definitiveness that I can feel within like I'm actually saying what I mean is usually just like, there's not as much inflection. It's very much just no or yeah.
I encourage our audience to pause this recording, especially if you're in your car because there's no one else there, and do it. Try it. If you're listening with a partner, do it to each other. It is frickin' wild. I don't know how much I talked about it in here. I know I talked about it on Partnership Podcast, but Trey and I went to an event back in May, and I wasn't giving the option for no. And I was told, well, yeah, but your body said. And it was one of the most harmful things. And those in leadership did not have a plan for protecting me and having a natural consequence of our harmful behavior. So for me, it was phenomenal to start it like this. And I just cried. And we had talked already, too, about collective healing. And so when we were first going around with no, I couldn't, it wouldn't even come out of my body. And then they asked us to say no as if we were seeing harm done and telling a perpetrator to stop harming someone. And so I got to just feel 20 bodies in a room say no. I was just walking and weeping.
Yeah.
Because it felt so good. And it felt so good to know we had a plan. They used a safer spaces diagram that I took a picture of so that we could have it and implement some of these same things, but kind of a red light, yellow light, orange light, green light type of thing, wherein they talked about all the types of harm that would could happen, had the potential to happen in a space like this, and the different forms of discipline that could be done, the different forms of harm reduction, the different forms of reintegration should the one who was harmed desire to come to reconciliation in a space. And then also that there are things that no reconciliation will be made, but guess what's talked about? How the perpetrator would be removed from the space immediately, which was not ever discussed in my space before in May. So that was great. So then we walked around and we did an exercise on the 3 types of no, where you would walk around, and then if you were allowing, you would stand still. And then those still moving would come up to you from the front or from the side with a hand, which talk about some of my trauma too. And they would place a hand on your shoulder, nowhere else but on your shoulder. And then you could do one of 3 things. You could look in their eyes and go, no, of which they would take their hand off. You could slink away, just move, of which they would move back. Or you could take their hand with your own hand and move it off of you. 3 ways of saying no. Again.
And it was all no. That's interesting.
No.
Because I was literally about to ask, like, well, did anybody actually say no? And so I love that they actually made you practice bodily and physically saying no.
So you had to practice all 3 ways.
Right.
And you had to be a practice. Everything is optional. They say this phrase. They say, if you want to opt in by doing, stand up.
That's cool.
Because opting in could look a lot of different ways. Dr. Betty Martin's consistently saying the choosing is more important than the doing. So they would say, if you want to opt in by doing,
right,
inferring that you probably could learn just as much. If your body was a no, if you were tired, if this was too much, you could stay on the edge and still learn. That is still opting in. But if you want to opt in by doing, isn't that a beautiful way?
And I like that the option too. It's like the default isn't everybody's doing this.
I know. People
I like
sit
that
out all the time.
I like that
all the time. And I kept saying throughout the whole thing, I'd never been to a conference where I felt so resilient all the way through.
Right.
And I think it's because of stuff like this. It was always, if you'd like to opt in by doing, go ahead and stand.
I would so use that. Like,
yeah, I know. Trey did all the time. Lots of folks did. Sometimes you were just sleepy.
And sometimes you can learn just as much from viewing. I'm such a visual learner.
Yes. And then sometimes you needed a moment, like to see how an exercise would go. Do I trust this space? Yeah, so you were invited to take opportunities to stand still, to stand in your agency and have folks come over and put a hand on you. You were invited to do that for as long as you wanted and then break out and then be a person who was going around and doing hands, and it all just flowed seamlessly and until everybody had an opportunity to do both, because also we need to practice how it feels to be said no to.
I was just about to say, what a great, like, almost rejection therapy.
Yep. Because in this space, it was going to be celebrated. It was just beautiful. It was so beautiful.
Saying no as an answer for someone else and not like a direct personal hit to you is so important. Like, there's such a perspective difference between those two things. And that's such a great practice to get into, of like, this no is not a personal attack on me. It's their desire to not have this happen.
I mean, revolutionary. Like if folks thought that we loved communication and consent before this, and this was like the primary
about to get
foundation we do,
worse.
sorry, it's only getting worse. Because you and I have always said that we want this work to heal an individual so that it ripples over onto everything, so that our world is bettered. This is not a self-serving only thing. This is I deeply believe, a way that would heal the world. And if more of us could stand in an embodied no, the world would be a better place. It truly would. So after we did that, then we would pair up in dyads, and we would practice stating our wants. These were things that were never going to happen. These were all pretend. And then we would say to a person, I want to do this to you, or I want you to do this to me. And the person had to say no for this pretend thing.
I love it. I love it.
We would make up a pretend thing. I was partnered with a wonderful human. And yeah, I said, I want you to come back to my Airbnb with me, and I want you to bring the best hairbrushers in the world, 5 of them, and I want you to lay me down on my couch, and I want you to have a clipboard, and I want you to have scheduled times for each of them to come through and brush my hair. And I just went on and on and on, and I said, that's what I want. And we were encouraged to say, our partners were encouraged to either say no or it's good to want. That's my favorite thing. Trey and I have been saying this all the time. It's good to want.
That's incredible.
It's good to want. Yeah, no, but it's good to want.
What a great thing to say to kids.
Isn't that great?
That was like immediately what came to mind. What a great thing to say to kids.
It's so good to want. Can't do that right now, but it's
so good to want. Yeah, don't stop that. Don't stop listening to what you want.
Right? So then we'd go back and forth forever saying ridiculous things. And it was just so fun. Just so fun that we were practicing saying no.
Right.
Before we did anything, we practiced saying no.
That's beautiful.
I have goosebumps just remembering it.
I mean, it's one of the hardest things I think we struggle with.
Why?
Generally as a society, because we're so... I mean, we just touched on this recently of just the alleged self-centeredness that comes with saying no and putting self first. And I think no is one of the biggest ways we put self first is by saying no.
Yeah.
We just don't do that.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, I feel like saying no also often incites questions. And yeah, it's kind of that learning that no is a full sentence, because there are so many things in my life right now that I haven't had the chance to tell you, but like after this, where I've started just saying, it's time for me to say no. It's time for me to not go to this event. It's time for me to say no. And every time I say no, I keep getting more and more questions. I'm like, I don't have to explain myself to you. The answer is no, because it doesn't feel good to me. I don't want to be there. I just don't want to go. And that's enough. And so it's funny to see the puzzling look on people's faces when you say that and stand in your authority and say no. And they go, what do you mean? It's a party. Why do you were invited? Why would you not? You're free. Are you not? Yeah, I'm free. I don't want to be there.
Isn't it crazy?
Like, why? It's so intriguing to me. Like,
so
why is it not
intriguing.
okay to just not go?
My high level thought is we all desire connection and we all desire belonging. And so for someone in a different space in their lives, they cannot fathom that someone else would miss out on an opportunity for belonging and connection in the most beautiful form. Okay. What's fascinating is when we can learn to attune to ourselves, to belong to ourselves, which you do so fabulously. Yeah, we freak people the fuck out.
We really do.
Right? When it's like, no, this is my limits. Okay, so I'll keep going.
Please do.
I'm going to skip over the waking up the hands. I'm going to come back to that because that's what we actually did next, and go to willing and wanting scales. My God.
I liked that.
Did
that
you see
video
that?
you showed me. That was beautiful.
So, what Holland's so beautifully inferring is that no is a complete sentence, and it is. Also, I think we don't talk enough about this is where things, when we simplify consent down to just rise, freely given, reversible, whatever, all these things, we're not talking about willingness and wanting. And I think it's important. I just do. Okay. So this, so good. It's so good. These scales of, oh, this is for me versus this is going to be done to me. Slow down. Okay. So do you want to go to this party? It could be a hell yes. Okay. So we're going to start with a most yes. It could be, I want, but may I or will you? Okay. It could be, that sounds nice. Okay. This benefits me and I feel the pull, but like these things would need to happen too.
Right.
Then we could get to like, yes, but only if I leave by 6.
Right.
All these types of things. I'm curious. Tell me more. Okay. Interesting. Need to fact find. I need some more time to check in on myself.
Yeah.
Right. I need some more time to think about this. Maybe like a true maybe. Not that, but this. We're getting into no. Not that, but this. So like, no, I don't care to go to that party, but I would love to get coffee with you.
Yeah,
next
like
week.
let's get brunch the next
Right?
day. You can tell me all about it.
Not now, but later. No, I don't want to go to that party this weekend. I have plans, but later. Sure. And then no thanks. Done.
No thanks.
No. Right? No. That's a whole spectrum of yes and maybe and no. Just beautiful to me. Then we have, are we willing to do something? And this is like an act of giving, right? And we'll break into this later. But we do have an enthusiastic yes. Yes, I'd love to do that for you. Then we have a neutral yes. Like, sure, right? Like, I'll do that for you. Then we have a yes with limits. Yeah, but only for this long. Then we have a not sure, tell me more. We're gathering info. Now we're in the maybe section. Not sure, I need to think about it. Now we're not that, but something else. Not right now, not ever. Just interesting.
Just the variety. It's lovely.
Right? Yes, you were exactly right. No is a complete sentence. And we do have more. Should we want to engage in it? And I think intuitively our bodies know who we can and cannot engage in with these types of conversations. Because some people are going to continue to push us and aren't going to understand our own limits. Right. So that just connects directly to that, and it's just fascinating.
It's lovely.
Okay, but then we did this game called Waking Up the Hands, which is Dr. Betty Martin's way for us to start to understand what we want with a neutral object that is not another person. I'm going to grab this little top right next to you. So literally, we all took something that fits in our hand. We have our camera lids right now. And we started by doing what we call meaning making, just looking at it and like assessing, is there meaning in it, right? Like, okay, it's a lens cap. Okay, Trey bought these cameras.
That's literally my brain immediately went to Trey is going to like I need to make sure they stay good in good condition because Trey bought these. Right, he's very like, specific about his.
When we hold an object, we immediately start making meaning of it.
You're right.
And
wow.
Cool. It's not me. It's wow. So yes, we do that first before we would do anything. We would get incredibly comfortable. Okay, and so through the week, we all became absolute experts at finding maximum coziness. I can't do it while we're on camera because I will fall out of the frame. But we would, I guess I kind of can in my chair.
Yeah, you go for it.
We were all on the ground the whole time. But we would get piles of pillows all around us.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, it sounds lovely, right? I know Helen's going to be mad at me because I'm touching the mic. So guys, I'm trying my hardest. I'm out of frame, but I'm kind of at the bottom. It's
That's
fine.
Funny.
Head had to be supported, body supported. This would actually work pretty well. And then a pillow on our lap so that our hands could be flat, flat, flat. Hands can't be doing any work. Okay. Not at all. Because what Dr. Betty Martin has found and others have found is that if we are exerting effort, then it's not for us.
Interesting.
It becomes service.
Right.
And this was all for us. So to see 20 people around a room, like all achieving maximum coziness, it's just so fun. And all the assistants would come around and be like, what can we do to make you 10% more comfy? And in the beginning, we were all rolling our eyes. By day 5, we were like pros. We were like, I need a pillow here. I need a little thing here. It was so cute that we all knew, like, okay, it's me time. It's settle in time. So then we'd all have our little objects that the whole bowl was passed around, and we would make meaning of our object. Again, yes, I thought of how much he invested in this. He wanted a podcast before everybody, okay? So then we tried to let the meaning go. And then we would just start to explore this for our own pleasure.
Okay.
And we would draw our attention to the object and then to the sensations of the object on our skin. And y'all, you can do this on your steering wheel if you're driving in the car. You can do this if you're in the shower. It's better if you're in maximum comfiness, like me. And then we are encouraged to close our eyes if we wanted, if that helped us draw more attention to the object. But then, again, while our hands were completely chillaxed, move this object at literally the slowest rate, like the speed of a slug, in our hands, around our hands. And then with our eyes closed, they would like encourage us to popcorn. Like, what are we feeling? Like, what are you feeling on your object?
The letters canon that are popping out on the front, that feels so nice.
How does it feel? Like, what is the texture?
Hard.
Yeah. So basically we would popcorn about the feelings of it. Then we would stroke it around our hands. We'd find different ways for it to feel good, going as slow as we possibly could. The point of which was to find what we really want, with it not being attached to another person at all. And then we spent a really long time talking about this idea of direct routes of pleasure versus indirect routes of pleasure. So this idea is that so many of us get the majority of our pleasure by watching someone else experience pleasure. So your friend's inviting you to this thing, right? Their pleasure is so often in your acceptance of the invitation.
Right.
Wherein you get plenty of pleasure just being by yourself and resting. And that is disconcerting to a lot of folks. And so then we started unpacking that. So then we started talking about what is it like to ask for what we want? And what are the reasons that we don't ask for what we want? And to hear this room of 20-something adults, most of which in a profession like this one, talk about all the reasons that we don't ask for what we actually want was equal parts heartbreaking and so validating and normalizing. And I couldn't wait to come back and tell our audience and our clients, like, hey, we're just normal. We're just normal. So we spent a forever time talking about that. Then we spent forever time talking about what we do instead of asking for what we want.
Manipulation.
So much manipulation. Also things like terms I had never heard, like desire smuggling. Like, don't you want to come to the lake house this weekend? These don't you want us?
Don't you? Come on. I know you do.
I know you do. Right. Or kind of like going in on one thing, but like wanting more than actually you said. Throwing temper tantrums, whining, doing it all on your own. Right? Being like, oh, fine, I don't need anybody. Becoming hyper independent. I mean, it was beautiful. I would say we spent like an hour talking about this. And it was necessary because so many of us are operating non-consensually outside of the wheel of consent. Because, and I loved this quote by Ines Nin, I was always afraid to take, so I gave. It was not a virtue. It was a disguise. I've been saying it to all my clients. Learned that in my other program, not in this one.
Right.
I was always afraid to take, so I gave.
Right.
It was not a virtue. It was a disguise.
Yeah. Wow. That's insane.
Right? It's like,
wow.
So playing with an object, things like this, allows us to really feel into who is doing and who it's for, right? Who is a gift for? So often we will do something. You and I just talked about it on a previous podcast, how much we love it when Trey asks if he can buy a meal for us, because it's not necessarily for us, it's for him. He wants the joy of it feeling good.
Right.
Great. That's why we encourage him to say, may I do this for you? Yeah, but to do something in order to control somebody else through an act of non-consensual service, right? That's wild. So yeah, we spent days and days doing things like that, days and days making different offers and requesting different ways of touching other people. So once we had graduated from waking up the hands with a normal little thing, then we would partner up with a person if we wanted to opt in by doing, and we would have just their hand, and we would say, may I explore your fingertips and your fingers for the 5 minutes. We usually did a 5-minute thing. And then it went from like hand to like forearm. And then eventually we did all the way up to the shoulder. But just exploring someone else's arm for your pleasure was one of the wildest things I've ever done in my life. We spent the first entire 2 days in take and allow. Wow. And they never called it that. They never called it that.
But you're sitting there like,
take and allow.
Take and
like,
allow.
when will we leave take and allow?
Right.
Right? But the concept was, so many of us think that we are, like, we just don't know how to take consensually. We don't know how to ask for what we want.
Really
and so instead we're serving. And so then most of the time that we're serving, it's not actually a true gift for the other person.
It's masked because, oh God, yeah. Wow.
Holland, it was like, I just kept sitting there going, Holland's got to do this. Like,
Happy to.
Oh my God. Yeah. But you had to truly embody beautiful forms of taking before we could even start to unpack the wheel. So then we started talking about different, God, it was just so good. The difference between willingness and wants. Again, I just talked about the scale, right? Wants are, it's for me, and I put my desires forward and respect the limits of the giver. Pleasure is likely. Doing and receiving is equal taking, and being done to and receiving is equal accepting. And the way it's for you and you express a desire is a may I or a will you question. May I do this, or will you do this for me? When you're willing, which I've never broke this down for my clients, so sorry guys, I didn't know until now. It's for them.
That makes sense, right? I'm willing to do this for you. That's a phrase that makes sense.
For you.
Yeah.
Right? I want to do this for me.
Right.
Right? Or I want this from you for me. But willing is for them.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's blowing my mind. Blowing my mind. When we're willing, we're putting our desires aside. And we're responsible for our own limits. Yeah. Right? I don't want to give outside of my limits. But yeah, I am putting my desires aside. I want to live in a world, and this is what we tell our clients all the time, like, I want them to be able to find their wants, but also it's not always time to want. Right. Sometimes it's time to serve and be willing. Pleasure might be present. You might, I've said this, I think, recently, that, right, pleasure is not something we give or receive. You might experience pleasure as an outcome of being a good giver and enjoying giving the gift, but it's just maybe. When you're doing and you're giving, you're serving. When you're done to and giving, you're allowing. So when someone's doing something to you, right, you're allowing access to your body, to your time, to your resources, those types of things. Still a gift. The offer is a would you like type of question, or what would you like, or what can I do for you? My famous one is how can I support you, right? That's I'm offering. So yeah, when we are willing, we're making offers. When we're wanting, we're making requests. Just blowing my mind. But again, we're doing all of this before any wheel stuff.
Wow.
I said the words serve, allow, take, accept, but those weren't put on there until the next day after they drew the wheel. So just to, again, deconstruct it like a dessert was delicious. So delicious. Because we were really living in it. We were really living in how does it feel to ask for what I want, to desire, to make a request of somebody else. Then we spent a lot of time talking about domains, which is my new favorite thing. They put a blanket on the floor.
Okay.
And they put a person in the middle. They asked for a volunteer. She stood in the middle, and we talked about what was inside domains. And what's inside domains is my feelings,
Okay.
my emotions, my body, my values, all these things that Sefi, we talk about a lot. And then they talked about that any relationship between two human beings is the space in between my domain and your domain.
Okay.
And we are just simply having conversations about what I can request of you and what you can offer to me, and then what you can request of me and what I can offer to you, all while being responsible for my domain. Not your job. My domain, not your job. Your domain, not my job. We must, as human beings, be accountable for and responsible to our own limits. They talked about limits and boundaries in a way that I've never heard, which is basically like a limit is like the outermost of what we have capacity for, you know? And then the boundary is basically the space drawn around
Okay.
our own domain.
Okay.
And agreements are the things that we do that we, again, are agreeing to that honor our limits. So it was really fun. So then finally we talked about the wheel. So we can put the wheel up now. The wheel is a doing half and a done to half. It's a giving half and it's a receiving half. The questions that you're asking is who is doing and who is it for? And Dr. Betty Martin watched Harry Faddis teach a thing called the 3-minute game. And that's where she watched these dynamics at play. And she was like, well, wait a second. Like a person could be doing and it's for them. And a person could be doing and it's for the other person.
That's taking versus serving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she was like, oh, well, wait a second. Now the person on the other end could be simply allowing access to their body. Or they could be accepting a gift. And so then she just broke it down more and more and more. As you can see on this diagram that's on the screen, there's the done to half, and there's the doing half, there's the giving half and the receiving half. And on the right side of the circle, you can see that we have take and we have accept. And both of those people are receiving a gift, but just in a different way. The take folks are asking a may I question. The accept folks are asking a will you question. But they're both getting. They're both getting. It's very nice, very yummy. Then over on the other side, on the giving half, we have service on the top left quadrant. And then we have allowance down in the bottom left quadrant. And when we serve, the action is going towards the other person. These are the two little arrows that y'all can see on the graphic. And the gift is for the other person. In allowance, the action is coming towards us. And the gift we're giving is the allowance of ourselves. And when we can get clear, like embodied in these places, that's a game changer. It's really, really a game changer. And to get to negotiate our place to a consensual, juicy spot here, to get to know our limits, to get to scale our willingness and wantingness, like I was talking about earlier, it's transformational. It was really transformational. Yeah, it was wild. We then spent hours and hours talking about the shadow sides of each of the 4 quadrants.
The outside of consent.
And it was a dark place. And we all had to have a lot of compassion for ourselves. And they did a lot of talking about how some of these people are perpetrators. Some of these people have been forced into the shadows by someone who was perpetrating.
Right.
Whether it was enslaved people. That was not their choice. Yes, they're on the outside, right? And so we talked a lot about no choice. It was just phenomenal. Just phenomenal. At one point, we put the wheel down on the floor, like we put painting tape down on the ground, and we put the 4 quadrants down on the ground, and then we practiced. You could opt in by doing and kind of stand on the inside and look outwards, and somebody could approach you. And then you would practice verbalizing hey, what would you like to do to me? And someone would say, may I fill in the blank if you were in the allowing quadrant. Then you could move over to service, and somebody would come around, and you could say, what can I do for you? And they would say, will you? And it was wild to stand and embody each of the 4 quadrants and to practice with real life folks. That was probably my favorite because I'm a nerd. And I was like, I'm playing this at all my parties in my house from now on. This is so fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun to see where everyone's comfortable and uncomfy. But all in all, it was a game-changing week.
I love how it shows that consent is really in every single corner of everything we do. It's not just sex. Consent is not just about sex and sexuality and those vulnerable positions. It's so much more. It's going to a party or something at work or talking to your kids about school. It's everything. Like literally every interaction we have with people falls under one of the quadrants of the wheel of consent. And that's what I love about it is intrinsic to who we are and what we do and how we live our lives. And I don't think that we are programmed to think that way and allow ourselves to think about the consensual and non-consensual activities that happen every single day to and by us. And it's incredible how much you can change your life. You can transform the way you live just by thinking about the consensual boundaries you are allowed to draw for yourself and the way that you can communicate with other people more consensually and more aligned with your values, honestly, just by considering consent as more than a sexual value.
Yep. And as we wrap up this episode, I would say that one of my biggest takeaways too is that it's okay to pause. It's okay to have a request come towards you or an offer come towards you. And say thank you for that offer or that request. I'd like to think on that. I think in this culture, we don't take enough pauses to check in on our bodies.
Right.
Y'all know how much Holland and I love witchy woo-woo stuff, but it's important to take that moment to check in with our bodies because it's so beautiful to be able to say to someone, thank you so much. Like the offer meant so much. The request meant so much. After checking in with myself, looking at my capacity, looking at my limits, yeah, I am not going to be able to come to that thing this weekend, but thank you. Just, it could change the world, those pauses. A deep breath. They were so sweet and wonderful at the conclusion of every day to remind us that we don't live in a world that practices this very well, and that many of us are in workplaces or homes where our agency is not valued. And so it's not going to be safe to practice this everywhere. And I agree. And Carmen, our wonderful instructor, would often tell us it's okay if you need to armor back up before you go out there. Because when we work so hard to build safe containers, it can often be very alarming to go out into the real world again. You and I have said this, like the way we communicate, the way we run this business is not at all like other things. And I will find it after I spend a week talking with you or something, and I'll go somewhere and I'm like, whoa, I so trust your own ability to honor your domain and your limits and to check in with yourself. And you are so trustworthy. And I go out into the rest of the world sometimes and I'm like, oh, yeah, others aren't always trustworthy. And I am so thankful for you. You really do an incredible job with your container of yourself. And so does Trey. I don't know if it's like a project. I don't know if it's like you guys are just born with it. It's really lovely to be able to trust the people you work closest with.
Mm-hmm.
And which is why it's one of my greatest joys to do this with partnerships, because if we can kind of heal the little family unit,
Right.
cool. If kids can know it's okay to want, it's a beautiful thing to want, then we start kind of at a micro level and it kind of can move to macro. But it's not safe everywhere. So y'all, please hear me. We talk about these things, but it's not going to be respected everywhere.
That's why the safer container was built first, like day one, because containers can be built and established and prolonged over a long time, but it's not everywhere. And it's the people that establish a container. Our container is you and me. We can't apply the rules of our container to the world. It wouldn't be consensual.
That's not an agreement that they have come to, right? It's not. And yeah, but in so much as the spaces that we do, function in a lot, we can in those spaces. And, okay, last thing, and then we'll wrap up. We did this thing called a listening turn every morning. A listening turn is where you set a timer and the person who's going first gets to talk uninterrupted we started with, I think, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. By the end, it was 10 or 15 minutes.
Wow.
And the gift that the person listening was giving was allowance. The other person was taking, sharing whatever they wanted for 10 to 15 minutes. It was wild because we were sitting down with people who didn't know us.
Right.
Yeah. Every morning. I mean, you were encouraged to always be with somebody you didn't know.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Holland, it was the best. And we've got to start putting it into staff meetings because so often as humans, we're like interacting.
Right.
We're waiting and that's lovely. But to just sit, I cried, I think, almost every morning with these random people who I didn't know. And it was beautiful. And you could choose as the person taking, as the person talking, you could choose to request that your listener sat with a completely neutral face.
Ooh.
Didn't
that would
respond
be so hard for me.
at all.
Okay.
You could choose that they could do that. You could choose for like vocal or not at all.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
You could choose for them not to make eye contact. You could choose for them to just kind of sit and kind of sit perpendicular to you and look the other way, just hold space. You could choose not to talk. You could choose for a person just to hold space for you. Some people choose movement. Some people chose, you just sit there quietly for me while I journal. Just protect my space. But a listening turn.
That's interesting. I like that.
And then at the end, you didn't get to respond to anything.
Oh, I like that. It's kind of like yelling it into the void.
Yeah. So Carmen and Robin were saying at the end that they do it now with each other all the time. They'll text and say, hey, do you have time for a 10-minute listening turn? 15-minute listening turn, yes or no. Negotiate. I don't have 15, but I have 12. I could do 12 on this drive from such and such and such and such. Great. The other person is not required to say anything.
Okay.
They're just holding space. Then between the two friends, and we could negotiate something like this too, you can say, the person when the timer goes off says, thank you so much for allowing me to talk. The other person says, you're welcome. Then you can say, would you like me? Was that good? Would you like some feedback? Would you like some reflection? Would you like some mirroring? And then the person, if this is an agreed upon thing, could say yes or no. So Robin and Carmen were saying that they do that with each other. Sometimes, they'll say, do you want any feedback or reflection? And sometimes the one's like, no, that was literally all I needed. Thanks so much. Bye. Love you. Or they'll say, yeah, actually, that would be great. Did anything pop out to you during the stream of consciousness? It's amazing.
That's lovely.
Trey and I've already used it all the time because it's hard to feel like you're not taking up too much space.
Right.
Talking for a long time like that. Yeah. I found myself, and I am a good talker, but feeling weird, feeling like, what do I talk about now? This is all like, I'm just talking about me. It's good. But anyway, we'll consent. I love it.
We love her.
Shocker.
Literally my favorite thing in the world.
I mean, it's just beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. And I can't wait to keep exploring it. I can't wait to play with it with more of the partners that we get to work with. I feel more connected to it now than I even did before, and I didn't know that was possible. And yeah, if any of my colleagues from our course are watching, hi, love you. You're the best. Yeah, but let's go ahead and wrap up this episode.
Let's do it. Guys, these are all our experiences and our opinions. This is Lauren's incredible experience with the Wheel of Consent workshop like a pro in DC. If you would like to contact us, you can contact me at admin@sexedforyou.com. Follow us on socials. Instagram is sex_ed_for_you.
If you want a free consult,
There it is.
go to sexedforyou.com/free consult, and you can apply to have 15 minutes with me, and we'll talk about your needs, wants, and desires, and how I work with clients, and if we're a good match. If we're not, I will make some awesome recommendations and referrals to other colleagues of mine who might be a better fit for you, or point you towards some free programming that might already exist. That'd be much easier for you. Again, might be the worst business model in the world, but we don't want people codependent upon Sex Ed for You, which is why we are so passionate about putting together these free resources for you, because you are an inherently beautiful, healthy, whole sexual human being, and we're here for you. Yeah, you have a right to self-determination and informed decision-making, so if you didn't like something we said today, that's fine. Leave it. Don't take it with you. Anything else? We're going to go eat some lunch.
Lunch.
That's all she could think about.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.